Hey everyone, so today I'm going to do a review of my Woodland Mills HM122 sawmill. I've had this mill for 4 months now, and I've been wanting to do a review for a while. Just so happens today we got a bunch of snow followed by a bunch of rain, and I really can't do anything else out there today. So this was a good day to do a quick review and saw some wood. So let me flip the camera around and we'll get started. Okay, so here's the mill. This is the HM122 9.5 horsepower model, and I got it with a track extension. That lets me saw logs up to about 17 feet, which is good because I do a lot of 16-foot lumber. Overall, I've been extremely happy with this mill. In the past, I've done a lot of milling with wood miser mills, trailer-mounted mills, and those have always been great. But when I started to shop around for a mill for myself, Woodland mills really jumped to the top of the list for a lot of reasons. The thing I like about them the best, I think, is the value. You get an exceptionally good mill for much less money than the other brands, and I think that stands out as probably the strongest thing to me. Now this mill, I've mounted this on a timber frame, and it puts the rails at about 29 inches off the ground, and I find that to be a very comfortable working height. And again, I was used to using trailer mounted wood misers, and they're up at about the same height. And so when it came time to put these rails together and mount everything, I wanted to elevate them up on a stand, and it's just a very comfortable height to work with. There's no bending over, my back never gets sore, and so that's worked out really well. Let me do a quick walk around of the mill, and we'll start inside here inside the bandwheel compartment. One of the things I really like about Woodland mills is they give you a nice metal bandwheel compartment. Some of the other brands have gone to plastic compartments, and they try and say, well, it's better if you throw a blade, it's not going to tear up the blade and cause damage. I'm like, yeah, well, you end up tearing up your enclosure. In some cases you still might tear up a blade, and just in my overall experience sawing for many years, if you get your mill dialed in and set right, you should not be throwing a blade. It should be very rare. So I still prefer an all metal cabinet, and they've done a really good job making a nice solid welded up metal cabinet, very high quality. Inside it's a pretty standard setup. You've got a drive wheel over here. This is your engine power shaft with a centrifugal clutch that drives a belt that turns that drive wheel, and the belt also acts basically as the running surface for the blade around that drive wheel. There's a tension adjustment here that's really easy to use if you want to tighten up that belt, and the belt does loosen up a little bit after its initial use, so it's good to retension that and check it periodically. Over here we've got the follower wheel. It's got a urethane belt insert inside of it. The 122 comes with fixed blade guides. You can optionally add a movable blade guide on this side if you want to move it in and out. I found it's really not necessary at all. These are hardened steel guides, and then in the back, which you can't see from here but we'll look at later, there's actually a ball bearing back there to help if you push too hard or the blade wants to deflect a little bit. That bearing is going to catch it and keep the blade inside those guides. And then over here we have the lubricant injection system. I used windshield washer fluid during the winter. This is a real nice system. Probably the best thing about this system is that Woodland Mills, at no extra cost, includes an automatic blade lubrication system. It immediately starts dripping the lubricant when you throttle up the engine, then shuts it off afterwards. Some of the other brands, some of the higher priced brands, they'll ding you a couple $100 if you want automatic blade lubrication. So it's very nice to see that come standard on this lower priced mill. And this is the valve right here. This is the throttle cable. When you throttle up the engine, it ends up pulling this little flapper, opens up that valve, and then your lubricant flows down and comes out right there. And so that's a really good system, and it's nice to see it come standard on the mill. The other main thing I want to talk about in here is the sawdust ejection port. I have never had this clog, and I saw a lot of sappy southern yellow pine. I've never had that clog up. Clogging is a common issue on many of the other mill brands. Some of the ones with those plastic enclosures, all they have down there is a couple holes, and it's kind of stupid. But this has a pretty nice big sawdust ejection port. It works very, very well in my experience. I mean, you can see there's a ton of sawdust over here. It just fans it out a good 8 feet and also dumps it straight down. So that works very nicely. And we can come around back here. This is the throttle lever. It's a hand grip, and I have this push handle and throttle bar oriented this way. If you had the mill down on the ground, you'd actually have it flipped up the other way. But this works very well, very comfortable to use. Over here, we're looking at the tracking and tension system for the follower wheel. This is the tracking adjustment, and I needed to make a very small tweak to mine. It's very easy to do. And then this is the tension adjustment, which you set your tension by turning this T-handle until this bushing right here becomes flush with the housing, and then there's a stack of Belleville disc washers inside of there, and when you bring that into that proper depth, the tension is basically automatically set for you. They have a real nice system where tracking and tension are independent of each other, and so you do not have to retract this thing every time you change a blade and retension it. That said, tracking and tension are related in the sense that when you set your tracking, it's going to basically be set for whatever tension you had dialed in at that time. And so as things change, maybe temperature changes, maybe the blade stretches, maybe the belt stretches, and things change, you'll probably never get that perfect relationship between tension and tracking that you had that very first time you set your tracking. And so what I've found, and this works great, is I'll come out here before I'm about to saw, and I will tension up the blade, and then I'll come around over here and I'll give that follower wheel 5 to 10 spins and watch the blade as it goes around, and just make sure that it's staying put where it's supposed to be. If it's not, what I've found is that a very slight tweak to that tension adjustment, and I'm talking about an 1/8 or 1/4 of a turn in one direction or another, is usually enough to get me back into that zone where tension and tracking are, 1-to-1 the way they were when you set the mill up initially. And so, yes, tension and tracking are mechanically independent, but they're still tied together physically, and you probably always will want to do a little teeny adjustment to that tension to get your tracking dialed in the final amount. But I've had this for 4 months. I've lost track of how many boards or board feet I've sawed. I have never had the blade jump off. I've never had any issues at all. It's been just very reliable, and that's great because some bandsaw mills, they are just not reliable. They're fussy, or they're touchy, or they're not repeatable. They never, you can't set them the same way twice. This one has been just super dependable, so that's been good. Up here is the lubricant tank, by the way. That's a welded aluminum tank, and it's got a flow rate valve right here. It's a very nice setup. Coming around back again, this is the winch used to set the height of the bandsaw head on the track. It's a very simple system. When I first saw it, I was like, boy, this looks kind of simple and kind of basic, but boy, does it work great. It's very accurate. There's a turnbuckle adjuster right here that you can use to level the saw head. And once you get it set up, boy, it works surprisingly well. I have to admit, I'm really impressed how such a simple winch system works so well. This is the metal bar where you can put your magnetic ruler scales. I tend to use the true scale here. These are true 1-inch increments. And then I'll snap on additional scales. These are magnetic rulers. You can get these on Amazon for, I don't know, three for $9 or something. Very, very inexpensive. And I'll use that to set up custom markings for custom increments. And for instance, the one I have here now has 1 5/8 increments. And I'll chase these marks down when I want to saw 2x lumber. That gives me a nice rough sawn 2x, and makes it real easy to follow those marks. And of course, you can add other magnetic scales for any increments you want. Here's that Kohler 9.5 horsepower Command Pro, and this has been very good, very reliable, starts easy. I've run it in all temperatures, basically between say 20 degrees Fahrenheit and maybe about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's worked great in all those conditions. The only thing I do not like about this, and I think this is a really dumb design on Kohler's part, is for some reason they decided they had to put the choke and the spark on off, and this is also a fuel on off valve, and the pull handle all within 4 inches of each other. And you know, I don't get it. It's just stupid. I could see these two being to get close together. I mean, that makes sense. This should not be here, and you know, you have to be really careful when you pull it and start it and you let the cord recoil back in, that you're not going to whack these handles, because they could break them. And I've heard reports of people doing that. Now, I've studied this, and I think I could actually take off these 3 bolts and rotate this recoil start cover down to put the pull start coming out basically down here. Or you could flip it and make it pull out to that side, and I may do that at some point. You know, you won't see Kohler, it's going to be crooked, it won't be horizontal anymore, but I think that would be a quick and easy fix to get this out of the way, because that's just way too crowded and it's kind of silly. Back up a little bit. The frame for the trolley, it's 6 or 8 pieces that bolt together, but it is exceptionally rigid. And actually, the good thing about it is if something's not perfectly square, or you know, maybe seasonally you get temperature swings and the metal changes a little bit, you can come loosen up all those bolts and just basically give it a jiggle, and it'll settle back in, and you retighten them up, and it's just super rigid. So for a frame that comes in a box in multiple pieces, boy, I am impressed with the way it comes together, and it's just a very good mechanical design, very good frame. My mill shipped with the older bushing design that they've been using for many years, and I really haven't had any problems with these, but they have come up with an updated bushing design, and they send out free parts to anybody who asks for them. And I may put those in at some point. They're supposed to reduce some of the jiggle. I don't have a whole lot, and frankly, I like to have this loose enough so that when I raise the head, the saw head, or lower it, that it doesn't bind. But the new bushings are supposed to cut down on the jiggle and basically give you a tighter fit without causing binding. So I'll probably put those on it at some point. I guess the only other thing I want to talk about is just 2 quick modifications I made. The first thing I did was I put some scrap plastic hose on the end of these stops, so that when the saw head comes back, it doesn't make such a loud thwack metal on metal, which I'm a mechanical engineer. I don't like to hear metal on metal. So these dampen that, and That was a real easy fix, and I did that on both ends of the track. And then the other thing I added was a rope that I can loop around here and hook under those stops. And you know, that's really mainly if we get a windy day. I don't want, and I usually put a cover on this, an old grill cover. I don't want this thing sailing down the track. The other thing I found is when I'm fueling up the motor, it's real handy to be able to tie the trolley down so it doesn't slide out on me while I'm holding a heavy gas can. So those are two little modifications that have worked out very well. So that's sort of my quick, not so quick, it's been 15 minutes I guess, overview of the mill. What I'd like to do now is button it up and saw some lumber. And what I have here is about a 10 to 12 inch diameter southern yellow pine log, about 14 feet long, and I need to get some 2x8s out of this for a project. So let me set things up and then we'll do a little bit of sawing. So before I saw, I'm going to go quickly through my what I call my pre-flight checklist, where I tension up the blade and check everything, make sure we're good to go. Okay, and here's where I like to come in and give this a bunch of spins and keep an eye on the blade, see what it's doing. And I can feel back here with my finger and I know where it's supposed to be, and it's real good. It's right on the money now, but this is a good time to check everything. Just make sure there are no problems with the belt, with any of the pulleys, with the guides. I do adjust those periodically, but I haven't had to adjust those for a while, so those should be good. But looks like we're in good shape here. The blade is tracking nice and true, and so we're ready to saw. One thing I want to add about this, I've seen a couple other reviews of various sawmills where people complain, hey, you know, the first time I throttled this thing up, the blade jumped off. You should not be finding that out when you throttle up the engine. You should be finding that out when you do your pre-flight check on the saw, among many other things. There's so many common problems people have with sawmills that really could be avoided or debugged if they just took, you know, a few minutes to just check everything over, rotate that wheel, watch the blade, make sure everything's working before you power up. All right, well, I'm gonna stop here for the video because it kind of gets repetitive from this point out, but this is basically the procedure I would use to take a pine log and work it down the 2x lumber. Here I was after 2x8s, and these are a true 8-inch wide. Sometimes I saw dimensional, sometimes I saw true. In this case I want a true 8-inch wide. It makes a beautiful 2x8. And what I'll do is I'll probably be able to get 4 very nice 2x8s out of this particular log. And then the first and the last cuts, I'll put those back on the mill and edge them, and I'll be able to get 2 nice 2x6s out of those. So that's not a bad deal to get 4 2x8s and 2 2x6s 14 feet long out of a piece of southern yellow pine like that. Anyways, that's the end of my review. I hope this has been useful, and thank you for watching.